Good morning. It is 9 o'clock Pacific time. We're going to get started. We've got a packed webinar for you today. I'm Brandon Laws. I'll be your moderator and co-presenter in today's session. Today's session is called Workplace Trends and Compliance, Employee Use of AI, and it's brought to you by Xenium HR and Garrett Hemann Robertson. We've got a great session in store for you today. We have a ton of registrations. I know people are trickling in. So we'll go over some housekeeping items before we get into the content today. Couple housekeeping items. We've dedicated an hour to this session. If we get done early, we'll let you out early, but we expect there's going to be a lot of questions about this. A lot of people are here to see Luke and get their compliance questions answered. So we'll make sure that we have the Q&A. We'll be monitoring that throughout the session. I'll be looking at that, and we'll address questions throughout the session, as well as hopefully get done a little bit early and leave time for Q&A at the very end. We'll also have the chat window open. There's a couple sections where I want to do what is called a chat waterfall, and just to get people engaged and get some ideas flowing out there. So make sure to open up that panel as well as the Q&A, and we'll continue to kind of monitor that. A lot of people ask about the recording and slides, whether they're available or not. Absolutely. It'll take a little bit of time to process, and then I'll send that out either late today or early Monday. And feel free to share that with your teams. That'll be available. And lastly, I just want to make this kind of clear, especially in this session with a compliance-oriented webinar. This is meant to be educational for you. We're going to answer some of your compliance questions, but definitely reach out to Luke at Garrett Hemann Robertson or Xenium if you need individualized advice. So let's do some introductions. I'll introduce myself, and then I'll turn it over to Suzi and Luke for introductions. I'm Brandon Laws. Like I said, I'll be your moderator and co-presenter. I've been at Xenium for over 16 years, and I'm also the host of a podcast called Transform Your Workplace that I started back in 2012 with Xenium. We have 520 episodes, and we talk about topics all geared towards making the workplace better. Workplace transformation is what we're all about. And so we do tackle topics like AI and communication and leadership development and those kinds of topics. So go check that out. All throughout my life, I've also been loving technology and adapting and trying out new technologies. And when AI came out, I jumped on it immediately. And so I'm a power user, and I'm really passionate about what it can do. But like many of you who are attending today, I'm also concerned about when you roll it out to an entire workforce and what that means as far as change management, compliance, and ethical use. So I'm really excited to have both Suzi here and Luke to talk about this topic. Suzi, you want to give a quick introduction to yourself?
Sure. So I'm Suzi Wear, and my current role at Xenium is Managing Director of Learning and Development Services. I've been with Xenium for 23 years. So my background consists of human resource consulting, leadership coaching and development. I put together all of our curriculum, and I facilitate workshops for our clients here virtually, and then also out at employers' workplaces. And I do some one-on-one coaching. So happy to be here and contribute to this topic.
Hey, thanks, Suzi. Luke, give us your little introduction.
I'm Luke Reese. I'm a defense lawyer. I spend the bulk of my time defending companies when they get sued, either by their own employees or others in the community. And as a result of that being where I spend a lot of my time, I see the world through the most cynical lens possible. I am always looking at what could go wrong. I am not a fun person to hang out with because I am saying no a lot. And that's true with AI. AI scares me to death because of everything that could go wrong. With that said, I have a lot of people in my life who are telling me it's changing the world for the better, and I know that's true. So I'm happy to be here, partner with you guys to talk about some of the concerns and hopefully come up with a plan for everybody to make sure that we're moving forward, utilizing all the great things that generative AI can do for us, while at the same time making sure we're being smart about it.
We appreciate that about you, Luke, because during my segment, when I'm talking about all the amazing things that AI can do, I'm going to watch you as you're probably cringing about everything that I'm saying, but you're here to keep me in check as well.
We are the devil on the one shoulder, the angel on the other.
I love it. So with Susie, Luke, and myself having very different vantage points on this, we're going to split this up into a few different sections. I'm going to first start by talking about how AI is impacting the workplace and what I'm kind of seeing from my vantage point. I think it is innovative, and I want to talk about what tools people are using, how they're using it. Susie's going to cover how AI is becoming a desirable tool for employees that employers could offer as a total rewards perk, perhaps, and also how it's impacting learning and development. So she's going to cover all that, and then Luke is going to have the biggest segment of this webinar. He'll talk about the legal and ethical considerations, and also give us some best practices for using AI in the workplace. So that is today's session. Again, Q&A is open, and get that chat window open because I'm going to start with a chat waterfall here. I want to know what tools you're using. So there's tons of tools out there, ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini. It does feel like there's a new tool every single day, and it's hard to adapt, and it feels like everything's moving so fast. So use the chat feature. I want to know, are you using AI? Both work, personal, doesn't really matter. And if you're not, I want to hear that too. What tools are you using as well? I can tell you for me, I have subscriptions to pretty much all these. Anybody who can access the internet and has an email can pretty much sign up for, ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, Meta. DeepSeek came out. I think that came out from China, and I know people are very concerned about it, but it was like everybody's blown away by this tool. I know a lot of people use like the free version of Grammarly. So some of these tools are free. You can buy up, and I think it's overwhelming for a lot of people. And it looks like, based on the chat, I'm seeing a lot of people are using Copilot, ChatGPT. Grammarly is a very popular one, especially if you're writing emails all day. It helps you refine your emails. Yeah, so a pretty good amount of you are using AI. A lot of these tools, I think one of my biggest concerns too, and I think Luke would agree with me on this, is a lot of these tools are starting to be integrated in our everyday tools that we're using. Things like Gmail and Google Drive and Outlook, all these AI is being built into it, whether we like it or not. And if on the employer side, if IT departments are really proactive about turning these things off before we have a policy or some training or best practices in place, some of us are able to use these without even really knowing it. I know me on the marketing side, I've got a whole tech stack of tools. The Adobe suite. I use a tool called Descript for my podcast editing and transcription tools. AI is all built into these things, and it is part of the subscription I already have. So that is like kind of where I'm at, is like it's moving fast. We need to adapt and probably train our people on this. And I know Susie will probably talk a little bit about the training development side. I want to do another chat waterfall and I want to know how you're using it as well. I'm going to give you a couple of use cases that I've found fun for myself, but I want to know like your day-to-day work or even in your personal life, and give, the audience like some ideas too. How are you using this? I know for me, I've used AI, especially the app version of ChatGPT, to convert handwritten notes to text. So imagine you're sitting in a meeting, and I know all of us have been there. We've a group meeting, you're on a whiteboard or sticky notes, those giant notepads, and somebody takes those back, and weeks later they transcribe it into text and then send an email out to everybody. Here's a recap of the leadership offsite we were just at. Well, now you could go around taking pictures of everything and convert it all to text and get an email out within minutes. So that's a use I've had. I've interviewed new employees, like a 15-minute interview about their background, experience, some of their personal experiences and philosophy, and I've turned that into a transcript. Take that audio, turn it into a transcript, and have AI help me write a bio. Years ago, when I had like new Xenium employees write their own bio, it would take weeks upon weeks. And a lot of people don't like to write about themselves. But using a tool like this, you could do it, quite frankly, in minutes. So I've used some of those. I'm very curious how some of you are using it at work. I know for me, I've got kids. They come home with math homework, story problems, and I'm like, I don't know how to help you. It's getting too complicated. Take a picture of that and say, help me or answer these, but also show the work. And so I can actually coach my kids on how to work through the problem, and it becomes a lot easier. So I think this is going to be an everyday thing for us at work too. We're going to start to find really powerful use cases that we can use at work. So this is not the future. This is like really the here and the now, and we need to use these tools appropriately. So I think I talked a little bit about this, but I see the benefits like now, but also in the future. It's going to help us make better decisions. I know for me on the personal side, I was curious if it could take a bank statement of mine and help me budget and give me some tips on what I should cut down on. And of course, it said like maybe you should stop door dashing so much. And so it's like think about it at work. It could help us make better decisions. It analyze complex information, large data sets, and help us make better decisions. I don't think this is here yet, but improve work-life balance, cut down on routine work, help maximize productivity. I know a lot of you, I see it in the chat now, like summarizing large bouts of information. I know like when I'm doing podcasting, I used to have to write summaries for those podcasts. And with the tools I already use, it transcribes the audio into text automatically. And I'm able to then generate a summary that I can put into a blog post or the show notes for the podcast. And I could do this across all of my work, but just within minutes. And it used to take me so much more time. And I know a lot of people are using it as a personal assistant too. So asking questions, or when you feel stuck, you're able to generate ideas and use it as a thinking partner. I've also used like voice mode on some of these tools like ChatGPT for coaching. Like you can role play. I know Suzi, you've done videos on the desk model, and actually you walked through it with Xenium's leadership team yesterday. And you could use the voice mode to walk through a scenario using the desk model of how do you give feedback to somebody in a respectful way, and walk through that before you do it live with the person. So like a lot of really cool tools. So the why behind why we need to adapt, I think like for an employee, future-proofing our skills, growing our careers, focusing on the most meaningful tasks. If we get stuck on routine tasks, glued to our email, writing emails from scratch, AI and other tools like this are going to help us focus on the most important stuff. And a lot of times that is the human to human connection, interaction. I know in the work that we do as consultants that interaction is the most important piece, and we don't want to get stuck doing mundane tasks. And I know in every business we've got those tasks that we just hate doing. So for employees, I know they want to free up their time, and I know for folks that are worried about adapting, or say like AI is going to replace us all. A lot of the thought leaders that I'm talking about it's like a co-intelligence, and actually that's a book I highly recommend by Ethan Mollick. Co-intelligence, use it as a tool, as an assistant. AI is not going to replace us, at least not now. It might change the way certain jobs are, but it will help elevate us and help our businesses grow. For employers, it's really no different. It's about like staying competitive and relevant in the market, enhancing operational efficiency. It's doing more with less. It's economics 101. It's like doing the highest and best use with the resources that you have. So I know like this quote that I have on screen here from the co-founder of Coursera. I love this one. AI is the new electricity. So just like electricity transformed everything 100 years ago, AI will now do the same. So think about businesses who are like, electricity, we don't need it. A lot of thought leaders are saying AI is kind of the same right now. It's like you either adapt to this. I know that's a little hyperbolic, but I think a lot of employers are kind of looking at this the same way too. It's like we need to adapt to the changing times because it's happening so fast. I remember AI, at least mass market, came out a few years ago, and it seems like these last 2 years have been going by pretty fast. So that's my soapbox about the why and kind of where we're at. Suzi, I want you to take it over and talk about from an employer's perspective.
Great. Thanks, Brandon. So I'm curious, those of you who have employees in your organization who are regularly using AI tools, What are they saying about it? Are they saying positive things about it, negative things? I'm curious what you're hearing. Is it helpful, not helpful? Please feel free to share in the chat. Okay, so time savings is one example. I hear that too. Helpful, okay. Yeah, it's interesting to have conversations with employees. So if you don't have a formal policy or initiative or strategies around using AI in your organization, it would be helpful to probably have conversations with your employees about how they're using them. I've engaged with folks in our organization, and I'm learning all kinds of ways that people are using it. Some more surprising than others, but overall, I hear from folks that it's helping them be more productive and definitely saving time, which makes you feel more empowered and in control of your job. So yeah, in some organizations, there are people who are like Brandon, who are really comfortable with early adoption and testing out new technology that can actually be change agents and help with some of those initiatives, right? So as AI becomes increasingly integrated into our workplace, leveraging these tools in strategic ways can help employees feel more empowered and engaged in their work. So one example is job design and efficiency, and a lot of you spoke to that efficiency and time savings. So when you think about how employees are feeling about their job, things that are frustrating to them detract from engagement and can create risk of turnover. So think about how you might use AI tools to help further automate repetitive tasks and jobs, improve productivity, enhance decision-making, and free up time for employees to focus on more creative and more strategic work, which can lead to a better employee experience and enhance their impact. The next is personalized learning and development. And I'm curious if anybody is using any tools from a professional or learning and development standpoint. But with AI tools, you can develop personalized learning paths for people. So they, once you have an idea of an employee's interests, skills, aspirations, then recommendations can be provided, including even mentor matching. And the trainings can be tailored based on the analysis of the employee's skills, performance, interests, and career goals. And so that could even be in real time, where there's like recommendations for a quick micro learning or more in-depth training based on an employee's career goals. Also, AI can be used for 360 analysis. So if you're doing 360 feedback reviews, especially for leaders, it can help identify patterns and pinpoint areas for improvement, including tailored action plans. So that's a great opportunity. Real-time feedback and coaching, Brandon mentioned that. There are feedback systems that can track employee progress with their goals and offer suggestions for improvement. It could also enhance people's ability to provide feedback. I am a little cautionary with that because I've seen examples where it didn't go so well. But my husband has 2 employees who have a tense relationship, and one of them utilized ChatGPT to provide feedback via email to their colleague, and it did not go well. Now, the email was very professionally written, but because of the relationship and the lack of trust and the conflict inherent in the relationship, it didn't really fly well. So again, this is where it's important to consider the human component of it and how to best leverage AI. Another thing that I thought was really interesting is using these AI tools to help teams work more effectively together, specifically around understanding and adapting to people's communication styles. So if you use tools like DISC or Insights, there's a way to put that information into a system, and it can provide recommendations for how to better understand strengths and ways to communicate with people who have different styles and approaches. So I think, again, that those are good tools, but also we need to make sure that we are having in-person conversations and connecting to build relationships. And then health and wellness is another example. And you all, I'm sure, have some type of wearable device, whether it's a ring or a watch, but there are more capabilities that are paired with those devices to help track stress, your focus while you're working, in addition to your health metrics, and offer suggestions like mindfulness exercises, movement, or breaks that can help you be more effective in your job. So where to start, and this will be a good segue to Luke's section. So, there's still this kind of intense debate around job losses from automation, but I think the overwhelming consensus these days is that AI does present some opportunities to help organizations perform at a higher level, but also to empower employees and enhance their engagement, as long as it is adopted and integrated effectively. So where's a good place to start with this? Before embarking on an AI initiative, leadership should make sure to align their goals. So their AI strategies and goals, align those with core humanistic values. So you may relate to this, but a lot of times technology is implemented for its own sake without consideration of its impact on people. So an important step in assessing new technologies is involving employees with the goal setting process. So, assessing how they may negatively or positively affect job design, employees' work-life balance, certainly ethical conduct, and other human factors. So leadership should first look at, in addition to the goals aligned with their values, they should look at the jobs. Where does AI make sense? So if the goal is to help people be more efficient and enhance job design, a good place to start is looking at tasks that are well suited for AI. So tasks that involve processing data, recognizing patterns, maybe executing program decisions, and then also looking at tasks that require human strengths like empathy, creativity, maybe versatile problem solving, and sound judgment, so that we're using them effectively and appropriately. And then job design ideally is optimizing the human AI partnership in different ways. So for example, this is already happening where customer service representatives are assisted by AI for initial questions that come in from customers. And then once those are filtered through the AI system, then they are routed to specialized customer service representatives for complex needs. Or manufacturing workers programming and overseeing automated production lines, while being able then to focus on process improvement and quality control, or even machine maintenance. Or another example could be knowledge workers who are supported by AI information retrieval or preliminary analysis so that they can focus on strategic decisions, end-to-end project management, stakeholder relationships, and coordination. So aligning goals and values, really taking a look at all the jobs and which tasks associated with each jobs make sense for AI and which maybe not. And then lastly, training. So employees are going to need training. And a lot of employees are already using AI without much direction or support. But if we're really wanting to maximize its effectiveness and make sure that we're doing it ethically and responsibly, they need to have training. And so, as part of your AI initiative or goals, building in a training plan. And you can even consider offering subsidized online courses, even degree or certification programs in fields like data analytics, machine learning, AI engineering, that might provide additional career paths and also help your organization. And then also consider job rotation. So when you think about cross-training, it can build diverse skill sets applicable across changing roles, and it can give employees firsthand perspectives on various operations that might inform AI applications. So those are some ideas. Now I think it's important to hear from Luke. So as you're looking at implementing AI, what should you be thinking about?
Thanks, Susie. And I appreciate both you and Brandon kind of highlighting just how effective these generative AI tools can be in any industry, right? I mean, this is not specific to anybody. This is going to be anyone and everyone all over the place. And that's reflected in some of the comments that I'm seeing here in the chat about all the different ways that just the people on this call are using ChatGPT to make their lives easier. It is a tool. It's a great tool. It's a game-changing tool, and I think the comparison to electricity is a good one. And like when electricity was getting rolled out, there's some consequences to the innovation, right? As we're trying to get our heads around these new developments, this innovative technology, mistakes are going to be made. People are going to be hurt in different ways. And our system is one where we keep in check the innovation by filing lawsuits when there are those mistakes made and people are hurt. And I think it's important to keep in mind, even though it doesn't reflect well on my profession, there are a lot of lawyers out there who are seeing the increase in AI in every industry as opportunity, right? If they can find people who have been hurt somehow because someone was utilizing generative AI, maybe not in an appropriate way, that's going to be the basis of a lawsuit where a lot of lawyers are going to make a lot of money. So it's important that we're looking at these issues with identifying where the concerns might be so that we can be thoughtful in implementing some of the risk management steps that are going to make sure that if there is a mistake, or really when there is an issue with the generative AI, we can explain ourselves in a way that would save us from liability. I thought it might be most helpful for today to not focus on any one industry and get into the nitty gritty of maybe specific statutes that have come out or rules that have been promulgated to, for example, lawyers have some. I want to stay away from that and instead talk about the big themes that will apply to whoever you are and whatever your company does. Those are competency, making sure that we know how to use this tool, confidentiality, making sure that we're not doing anything that could get us in trouble with where the information we put into generative AI goes, and disclosure. How do you communicate this to your clients or whoever you are using AI to serve? Once we identify those three big concerns, we're going to go through the three areas in which we can really avoid all the risks that are keeping me up at night. It's training, making sure we have policies, and effective communication, which not surprisingly are the exact same things Susie just outlined as being important from her perspective. So starting with competency, AI, generative AI especially, is a tool. And just like any tool that you're going to utilize in your workplace, you got to know how to use it. And that is something that I don't think many of us are super comfortable with right now. And that's because it's so new, it's so game changing. It's not like the next step in the computer technology that we had. This is new stuff. So we need to make sure that before we start using it in our professional lives, we're getting trained on this. This has been explained to me in a way that makes a lot of sense of, you don't want to tell an employee, hey, here's ChatGPT. I hear it can make your life easier. Go for it. See how it works, right? You need to make sure that there's a common understanding of how you're going to use it. And just from a basic starting point, that's learning what information to put into ChatGPT. It's one thing to say, I need help creating a presentation versus I need help developing, a presentation that will communicate the following. And not all of us, especially those of us who have been out of school for a while, we don't know exactly how to do that. So making sure that we are educating our employees on how to use the tools before we let them use them is super important. The other one is making sure that we're using the right tools. Brandon listed several of those generative AI programs, and I saw a bunch listed in the chat that I've never even heard of before. And I think that's true, right? There is new technology being thrown out there every day. I think we all can agree some of it's going to be better than others. That's the way the world works. Well, if there is a problem, so if AI causes someone to make a mistake, the first question you're going to be asked is, did you understand the tool that you were using and the appropriate way to use it in your community? It's what I call the standard of care. Did you exceed the standard of care, and despite your best efforts, a mistake might have been made? Or did you not have any clue how to use this stuff and you were being kind of reckless in how you were using this tool? So one thing that I want everybody who's going to have to make decisions about when and how to use generative AI to do is to say, what's the standard of care for my industry? And if you don't know that answer, figure it out. You can talk to industry leaders who are being real thoughtful about how to integrate AI into their work. You can talk to IT experts in your industry. You can talk to lawyers who specialize in your industry. But make sure that you are comfortable, if you're ever asked the question, what's the standard of care, to be able to say, I know, and here's what it is. Being able to articulate that and show that you did the research to understand it will go super far to helping keep us out of trouble if a mistake is made. One example from my own life is lawyers are using generative AI to help do legal research, and it's great. You can write into an AI program, I need a case that stands for this proposition. And whereas in years past, I'd be spending hours on the computer or hours in the library, it will spit out a site that I can use within seconds. And a lot of times they're correct, but there are now many, many, many examples of where ChatGPT in particular made it up. ChatGPT wants to be helpful, and sometimes they'll just create a case. It will look like it's right, it will sound like it's right, and people are submitting them to judges in support of their arguments. But then with a little research, you can learn they're completely fraudulent. That is below the standard of care. And judges are making that very clear when there are chastising lawyers who are doing that. So making sure that you know, if I'm going to do case law research, I can't use ChatGPT, but I can use a special Lexis generative AI that has more protections in place. That allows me to show that I did meet the standard of care, even if the Lexis search engine that I use or generative AI program that I use happens to make a mistake as well. I can explain that I was thoughtful. The other thing is who's supervising who, and this has me very worried about generative AI. The calls that I'm getting are, hey, I own a business, we do X, Y, and Z. I'm 100 years old. I don't even want to learn about AI, but my employees, especially the younger ones, are telling me it's super helpful. So they're using it. And I think that's great. I trust that they'll do it correctly. That's not good enough. If you're in a position where you are supervising people's work, especially when you're vouching for it or signing off for their work, you need to understand what programs are being used, what tools are used, and make sure that you're comfortable that it's being done correctly. So, if you have a team of people who are preparing projects, whatever they may be, and those are going out to the world either as a work product or something that you're charging people for, if your name's on it, if you're the one who's supervising, you've got to make sure that you are addressing all these issues and you're not passing that on to someone else. The last one is mistakes are made. My example about ChatGPT and the case sites is just one of many examples that I think every industry has, where for whatever reason, the generative AI just wasn't perfect and it made a mistake. And I would suggest that it's our obligation to make sure that we have the protocols in place to catch those mistakes. And that really boils down to what you're using the generative AI tool to do. There is a big difference between help me get slides organized for a PowerPoint presentation that says A, B, and C versus tell me how to do my job, right? If you ask ChatGPT, what's the, how many weeks of leave does someone with a medical condition in Arizona deserve? It's going to give you an answer. It could be right, but if I don't have the ability to double check that and verify if it's true or not, I'm not doing my job. So making sure that you're thoughtful about if we are asking ChatGPT to generate or generative AI to actually generate something, do we have the human in place who is competent to identify if a mistake is made so we can catch it? And I think a little more nailing down into that, do we have a person in place where if they don't catch the mistake, can we explain it wasn't because of our best efforts, that we were thoughtful about our process to make sure that we were doing this correctly? So competency is risk one. The second one is confidentiality. This is going to impact different industries in different ways, but a lot of people have confidentiality obligations with the information that they have access to. This could be HIPAA protected information if you're in the medical field. This could be your own company's proprietary information, customer lists, prospect lists, stuff that you definitely do not want getting out into the world. I also draft, 5 or 6 confidentiality agreements for my clients every week. And if one of those is in place, you likely have an obligation to keep the materials that you're looking at confidential. Not all generative AI respects confidentiality. ChatGPT being the biggest example, if you put information into ChatGPT, it now goes into ChatGPT and can be used as it makes decisions for other people. I am absolutely not the person to explain how this could happen, but if, for example, I uploaded a bunch of medical records for a case that I'm working on and said, hey, ChatGPT, can you summarize this? Can you tell me, create a chronology of care that I can use at a deposition? It will give me an awesome timeline of all the medical care, hit the high points. I can have it highlight special procedures. It can give me, in again, a matter of minutes, something that would have used to take a lawyer a couple days to put together. And that's awesome. However, now all of those medical records are in ChatGPT, and I have no control if they're going to get spit out at somebody else who asks a question that may draw upon that. And this happens. There are examples of this. And in doing that, even if it doesn't find its way to other people, just by me creating that possibility, I have violated HIPAA, which is no bueno. I have violated a protective order that's likely in place between me and the other parties saying I'm not going to disclose their client's medical records anywhere. That's no bueno. The courts could take issue with that and find me in contempt for not meeting my ethical obligations to keep confidential, which means I don't get to practice law anymore. That's not very good either. So there could be extreme consequences just because I got over anxious about creating that awesome chronology and didn't think through some of these confidentiality concerns. Here, I think it is important to ask yourself, okay, in my industry, in my business, what are my confidentiality obligations? And make sure that you know what information can be put into ChatGPT versus what cannot. I have a friend who works in a not-for-profit industry. He was trying to create basically a summary of donor information to help them be more strategic and where they could find more revenue sources. I talked this through with him, and he ultimately decided it was okay to use generative AI to basically say, how can I create an Excel spreadsheet that will let me process information in a way that'll give me the results that I want? That was the decision made instead of, hey, ChatGPT, here is our donor list and a bunch of information about these donors. Can you summarize it for me? ChatGPT could have done that, and it probably could have done it great. But then all of their donors' identities, how much they've donated, their addresses, credit card numbers, maybe, all of that gets put into ChatGPT. And we decided we just weren't comfortable doing that for a variety of obvious reasons. So again, being thoughtful about what your confidentiality obligations are so that you can use the tool in a way that's appropriate for your industry. That's what we need to be thinking about. The other thing here that's super important, and this is where the standard of care plays into it as well, there are plenty of generative AI programs that have confidentiality. There are ones that can be created that'll just be used for you, so the information never leaves your control, and that can be super useful. So it's just making sure that you identify this as an issue and that you're competent to know which tools you're using in a way that's not going to get you sideways with any of those confidentiality regulations specific to your industry. All right, the third big risk is disclosure. There's an awkward feeling when the job that you've been doing for 20 years can now be done by AI. I don't know if y'all have that experience, but a big part of my job is picking up the phone and telling people what the law is. And there's no big difference between calling me now and going to ChatGPT. What does the law say on this? I use generative AI to get questions all the time now. Again, where I used to have to go pull up statutes and do research in the library, I can go to a server I have, it's a legal research server, and just say, hey, can you tell me the answer to this? And I get the answer. I feel competent because I know enough about what I'm talking about to identify those mistakes. I'm not putting any client-specific information in there, so I'm comfortable in not violating confidentiality. But I am then telling my client, here's the answer to your question. And by the way, pay me for it. I am struggling with what's my obligation to say, hey, I just used generative AI to do this much quicker than I could have otherwise, which saved you some money. That's great. But is it really my work product? Am I really doing this? Or should I just be saying, hey, we can answer this with ChatGPT. Do you want me to do it? Or do you want to do it yourself? Those are the sorts of questions that I think we just need to be thinking about and making sure that you're comfortable with what's being disclosed with your client, your customer, whoever you're working with in the community where AI may be helping things. There's no formal rules about this. There's no, here is when you need to disclose and what you need to disclose. We'll probably get to the point where there is, but I definitely think you need to be comfortable with how this is being communicated to the people who you're serving and using the generative AI. Practically, what does that mean? In addition to just thinking, what is your own comfort level about how you want to have this dialogue? I think it needs to start being included in engagement letters, in contracts, in your agreement with the people that you're going to serve. If you make a decision that your organization is going to use generative AI as a tool, it's important to say, we are going to use generative AI as a tool. Here's how it is going to likely be used. Just having that disclosure up front makes it clear that that's what's being done and gives whoever you're interacting with an opportunity to ask questions, as opposed to just coming back later with complaints when they learn something that they may not have known ahead of time. I also think it's important for specific projects to think, if I'm going to use generative AI and the person that I'm serving may not know that or may not be comfortable with it, raising it ahead of time. No one's ever gotten in trouble for prospectively reaching out and saying, hey, I wanted to make sure you were comfortable with this. But a lot of people have gotten in trouble when something about the project doesn't go right. Your client finds out that perhaps you were overutilizing generative AI and they say, wait a minute, I never gave you permission to do this. All of those risks can be mitigated quite a bit by just addressing it up front. The other piece is charging for this. Although a lot of the generative programs that we've listed here are free, many are not. And there's a question of who should be paying for the tool. That's going to be specific to every industry, but as you're thinking through these issues, and as we're going to talk about in a second, as you're developing your policies, coming up with ideas of who is going to pay for this work, how you're going to pass along the final work product that AI may assist in to whoever you're charging for it. All of that needs to be thought about ahead of time so that, again, if you're ever asked, why did you do it this way? You can explain that we made a decision. Here's why we made the decision, not try to come up with a justification after the fact. All right, how do we minimize this? I've hit upon this in talking through these risks, but I just want to highlight before we move to questions that there are three things everybody needs to be doing before they allow generative AI to be used in their company. First one is training. Like we talked about, competency is key here, and knowing what tools you're using, knowing what tools your team members are using, and making sure that they have sufficient training to do it correctly is absolutely key. Suzi mentioned that there are all kinds of seminars, trainings available that you can sign your folks up for to complete, and that's great. From my purposes, it's also important that you can show you were comfortable that the training that was being received was appropriate for the work that needed to be done. So making sure that you've got someone in-house who either because of their own expertise or because of the advice they've gotten from others can say, it's appropriate for our office to use fill in the blank generative AI program. It's appropriate for our office to use that program in the following ways. And here's the trainings that either we provided or we sent our people to make sure that they could do that in a competent way. That explanation is your absolute number one defense if a mistake is ever made. So being able to be methodical about the training, confident that it's the appropriate training is important. I've also highlighted here, everybody has to go through the training. Again, if we're going to be signing off on the work product here, you can't rely that just the kind of front level workers are on top of this. This is too important of a technology for me not to understand, even if I'm going to ask others in my office to utilize it. So convincing those who may be resistant, convincing those who may say, I don't want to learn this, I'm retiring soon. Those are the people who need to know, nope, if we're going to utilize this as a group, everybody's got to at least have a base level of competence. And training's ongoing. This probably goes without saying, but this technology is changing every day, and the trainings are playing catch up. So at least for the foreseeable future, training on these tools that may be used needs to be constant. And what that means probably depends on those experts that you're hiring to train to give you some guidance on how frequent and what that looks like. But this is not we give everybody a week seminar and then it's a done issue. This is fluid and it needs to be treated that way. Policies. I think policies are oftentimes overrated. We over policy everything, and by doing that, we really minimize the importance and the usefulness of a lot of policies. But this is one where we need to have universal policies about how generative AI is going to be used in our companies, just because it is such a new area. Here's what we need the policies to do. And this is not the sort of policy, where we have to have specific language because the law requires it. These definitely need to be customized to your industry, to your organization, but that customization needs to hit a few points. One, everybody in your organization is going to understand the policy. We can't have different understandings of how generative AI is going to be used amongst your team members. So they need to be uniform. They need to apply to everyone, and everyone needs to make sure that they're trained in them and understands them. I also suggest starting from scratch. This technology has been so quickly overtaking our lives that a lot of people are using different programs in different ways, and we didn't have an opportunity or really the time to build this up naturally. So I do think, and I know a lot of people push back on this, but I think it's important to say, okay, if we haven't been on top of the generative AI issue as an organization, we are going to start by saying we don't use it. Just flat out ban. Nobody is authorized to use it until further notice. And then start building up how you want to use it. And those should start with what tools are we going to use? So this isn't an AI policy so much as how are we going to use ChatGPT, whatever fill in the blank tool that it is, and make sure everyone's using the same one. You can have more than one. You can have all that are useful as long as you're comfortable, again, with what they are, that you're training your people appropriately on them, and that you're comfortable they're appropriate for the work that's being done. But I want to make sure that the policy is, unless we tell you you can use something, if it touches upon this generative AI, you are not authorized to use it. Then you need to make sure that the policy lines up with the training. So you really do need to be working with that expert who you're going to hire to make sure that we're competent in how we use this stuff. and lean on their expertise about what the policy is going to say. That can touch upon confidentiality, right? My friend in the not-for-profit world now has a policy that donor information never gets inputted into generative AI. That makes sure that they're not going to run afoul of some of those concerns. My policy here at my firm talks about what we do to check case sites that generative AI may point us to. None of us want to be on the wrong end of one of those stories of submitting a fake case to the court. So we have pretty specific rules for our lawyers. If you use AI to help create work, what are we going to do to make sure that we're double checking that in a way that's competent? A lot of companies are implementing policy language that says something along the lines of generative AI can be used to assist, it can't be used to make decisions. And I think this is a really important thing to keep in mind. It's one thing to say, hey, can you organize this information in a way that will help me understand it better or present it to someone? Can you give me some ideas of how to get a letter started that will communicate this? That's, I think, good, safe, useful use of this product. What's not is saying, hey, ChatGPT, should I fire person A or person B? Again, it will answer you and it will do it in a way that's pretty amazing. But that's a decision that the computer should not be making. It's one that a human should be making for a million different reasons. So having that be part of your policy and your training of there's a difference between using this as a tool and using it to make decisions or to create final work product or something that would be a step too far is language that I would want to see in any policy. And then be able to demonstrate that you enforce the policy. These policies as a defense tool really don't carry any weight unless you can show that you were monitoring your workforce. And if somebody was not following these rules, you took action. Doesn't mean you need to fire somebody who gets a little overzealous with what they use, but you need to be able to demonstrate, hey, as a reminder, this is not consistent with how we do this. We need you to make sure that you're following these rules. Every time that you show you took action is an opportunity to show that you took this seriously, that you were taking steps to follow it, and that, again, if a mistake was made, it's not something that you could be liable for. It's just a mistake and nothing more. Finally, communication. This is probably the best advice on any risk management issue that we could ever talk about. You need to communicate effectively. Here, that means communicating with your team. That's creating a policy, training people on how to use the generative AI that you want them to use, and making sure that you're policing it and taking action if and when mistakes are made. Communicate with your experts. This is making sure that you're talking to people who can make sure that you're using this tool in the appropriate way. I do want to emphasize here, because this is such a new industry, there's a lot of people whose only goal is to sell you products, and that's great. I mean, that is an important role in this, but those aren't the people you want to talk to in making sure that you're using it appropriately. You want to talk to the people who are knowledgeable on where the shortcomings are, where the problems might be, and helping you make sure that you get ahead of them, not just trying to sell you a product. And then finally, communicate with the people you serve. Like we talked about before, there are going to be complaints from time to time if you are doing work that traditionally you would do by yourself that now AI is doing. You need to make sure that you're communicating that with the person who you're charging, and make sure that you do it in a way that you're comfortable with, and do it up front. It's a lot easier to ask permission here than it is to beg forgiveness if there's a problem. Again, these are big concepts. I do think they apply to everyone, but as you're looking at this, keep in mind each industry, if they don't have specific rules right now, and most don't, they're going to pretty soon. So keep an eye in the paper, keep an eye in your industry journals, keep an eye everywhere you look for updates. And as they are made, make sure that you're incorporating them into all these things we're talking about.
Good stuff, Luke. That's a lot to think about. I'll open it up for Q&A. We've got 7 minutes left, so if you have questions, put it in the Q&A module. I'll keep an eye on that. So, Luke, who owns this? This is a lot, like the training, the policy. Like, is it a team of people that is organizing these ideas and executing? In your experience, what's the setup?
So I am getting a lot of questions from HR, and I think a lot of companies are saying this is an HR issue, and it's not. Like this is an ops issue. This is how do we
Yep.
do our work? So, that means different things for different companies, but I think this is you need your whole leadership team making these decisions.
Question we got: how do you get buy-in from employees that are more cautious of AI due to the environmental impacts? I don't have an answer for that one.
Yeah, either do I. I mean, that's one of the big impacts of a lot of this innovation is innovation comes with a cost, and there's a lot of people who have pushback for that. It's a decision you have to make for your culture, of where you want to fall on that spectrum and how you want to sell it to your folks.
In terms of like order of operations from the ideas that you presented today, does it go in order of how you presented, or do you think one thing comes first, like policy?
I think the first thing, if I had my way, and I know not everybody can do this, the first thing would be a policy that says until we know what we're doing, we're not using generative AI. And then work really hard to identify those experts who can help you come up with a policy and a training program so that you're using AI in a way that you not only feel is appropriate, you can explain why it's appropriate.
Yeah. Yeah, I think personally, just training on the appropriate use is important. I also think prompt engineering is a course that everybody probably needs to take. I know like Coursera has a ton of courses on prompt engineering because like in my experience, it's the way you prompt and provide the input, the better the output's going to be. And as long as you're clear and give it context is everything, you're going to get a much better output that's less likely to hallucinate an answer for you. I know, like, when you're talking about case law and stuff like that, AI could start hallucinating cases if you aren't specific about what you're after, and even asking it to provide like source links and things of that nature. So, just in my experience, the prompt engineering is a huge skill that many employees will need. Susie, you got any thoughts before we end? Any parting thoughts on your end?
No, the only thing I was just thinking of is on the training, you mentioned Coursera. It's really cost effective online training. And then a lot of the academic institutions like MIT, even Harvard, Wharton, they have professional development courses online. And so you can search. But I love what Luke said. If you're looking for AI training, be really clear on what fits your industry. So a lot of like MIT, for example, has specific industry use for AI. So vet those courses, make sure that they're relevant to your industry and your policy and how you're going to want to use AI in your organization before you implement those or empower employees to take those courses.
Okay, it looks like we're going to wrap up a few minutes early. There's no questions in the Q&A. I'm actually shocked. But Luke, you probably just covered everything that people came to the session for. So I appreciate you for coming on, and Susie, you too. We'll send out slides and the recording following the session. And if you would be so kind to fill out the survey that will likely pop up on your screen after you close out the webinar, we'd appreciate it. It helps us form future topics, and we want to know if you want more stuff like this and any other topics. So thank you for joining us this morning. Have a amazing weekend.